placer y un honor para nosotros tenerlo hoy aquí. Nos va a dar una charla sobre arte contemporáneo y la relación entre los museos y el propio arte que se ubica en su interior y un poco una relación conceptual entre la arquitectura y el arte. Bueno, solo comentar que Taisto es finlandés, sus familias, sus padres son finlandeses y él nació en Estados Unidos y ha desarrollado toda su vida académica en Estados Unidos. Sin embargo, su tema principal de investigación es la identidad cultural de la arquitectura finlandesa. Él ha trabajado con Cloepfil hace varios años y tiene muy buena relación con la familia, ¿no? Entonces, después sería un tema interesante porque a nosotros creo que sería un tema interesante que podríamos quizá hacerle alguna pregunta al final de la charla sobre esto, porque si es un arquitecto que no acabamos de conocer muy bien y sin embargo creo que es bastante interesante, ¿no? para nosotros. Bueno, quizá destacar que sus tutores de doctorado fueron personajes tan importantes como Tony Libeskind y Alan Colgium, que es un dato bastante interesante, y él ha dado clases, charlas, conferencias por todo el mundo, en Zaragoza, en Adjaye, en Shanghái, en Bucarest, en Kioto, en Viena, en Bangkok. Ahora viene, como he dicho antes, es la primera vez que visita España, porque está ahora terminando un libro sobre Ponti y sobre el tema del museo. Entonces está muy interesado en visitar Bilbao y conocer el efecto Guggenheim en directo, es una de las razones por las que ha venido. Entonces esta última semana ha estado en Madrid dando varias charlas y luego pues tenemos el placer y la oportunidad, ¿no? de tenerlo aquí.
Thank you for coming. I can't sit up there. I can't do it. So, I apologize, but I don't have Spanish. I can't speak Spanish, so that's my first thing I have to say to you, so sorry. So you just have to suffer my English. And hopefully, Lucia, I want to thank her for inviting me and organizing my lecture, and thank you very much for coming. So, I have all these notes. I have a problem. Sometimes I just throw them away, but we'll see what happens. The lecture is really in about 3 parts, and the basic question is the relationship between the work of architecture and the work of art. The relationship in an art museum and how the art museum itself architecturally is designed, and then what the practice of art is. Is today's museum relevant and appropriate for the art that is being produced today? A lot of people are wondering what this thing is up here. This is Bas-Jan Adder. He's a Dutch artist who he was dead now. He tried to sail, one of his performances was he tried to sail a small boat from the northeast coast of the United States to Holland, where he's originally from. And he disappeared. Nobody ever knew where he ended up with. So, and the title of this work, he never says anything. If the video was better, you'd see him. He's crying. He's crying. And the title of the work is I Can't Tell You. So if you ask him why you're crying, he can't tell you. So these are the kinds of different takes on art that I would like for you to think about as we look at the idea of the art museum. And I'm going to start with a little survey. A lot of you know about where the art museum started, the idea of the typology of the art museum. And we'll look at that, and then we'll look at some contemporary examples. And I'll also talk about the 4 museums in Denver. And then, if there's time, I have a lot of artists that I'd like to show, and then ask you if it makes sense for them to be in an art museum, their works to be in an art museum. Is it appropriate? this is the wrong one. Something was wrong there, so here we are. So these are the names of the 4 museums that are in Denver. Gio Ponti, all of you know Gio Ponti. He's one of the architects that is least appreciated in the United States, which I think is a really sad situation. The Denver Art Museum of his, which opened in 1971, was one of his last works. And it is Gio Ponti's only building in North America, and it's in Denver. And we all know about this guy, right? David Adjaye is become very successful. He did a small museum of contemporary art that you'll see shortly. He's originally from African background, but studied in England at the Royal College of Art. And Brad Cloepfil is an architect who was responsible, was quite controversial in New York at Columbus Square, for redoing Stone's building and turned it into the Museum of Art and Design in New York City, and that caused a lot of discussion in the United States. So, anybody been to Denver? One person, that's fantastic. When were you there? When? What year? 10 years ago. Okay, it's changed a lot. And so quickly, what you have is, this is Michael Graves' public library. Here's Ponti's building. This is the Libeskind addition to Ponti's building. And this is the Clifford Still Museum. And on this map, I don't have the David Adjaye yet. So this is the first one. There's the second one. You've seen this, right? This is the David Adjaye building. It's a very good building. And this is the Clifford Still building by Brad Cloepfil, which I also think is a very good building. So, where do museums start? There's the Louvre. Is it a proper museum? How do you define an art museum? Well, it's a private collection, which when then the French Revolution came, and it became open to the public. So it wasn't a purpose-built or designed building at all. And we all know the plan. I'm sure everyone's been there. This is an interesting one that not a lot of people talk about. Lucia talks about it, though. And this is an interesting one because it's a private collection. John Stone designed it, and it's a private collection which was open to the public. So it was designed initially by a private party to show artworks to the public in general, which was quite radical in the early 19th century. And here's the interior, which I'm pretty sure is being destroyed. It's been renovated in a very bad way. Isn't that right? I think that's the case. I saw it many years ago, and it was terrible. And what I want if you look, I just want you to keep in mind how the art is displayed. And there's usually, you all know of these kinds of museums where you have a bench, right? You have some chairs. You can take some time and then just sort of contemplate the art. Right? There's a whole set of codes, and there's, I don't know if you've heard of Pierre Bourdieu, but he's a French sociologist who talks about what the reason, what the rationale, the logic of the art museum is, and it's about not just painting and art, but music and literature itself. So I'll quote a little bit from him, try and keep it simple. A work of art has meaning or interest only for someone who possesses the competence, that is, the code into which it's encoded. So there's stories about it, depends on which period it is. Why is the painting, what is the painting about? There's all kinds of symbolism in the painting. Why is it arranged in a certain way? What's the history? What's the political, social, economic context at that time? It's all in that work of art. So what you do, just like they did in the 18th century when you had the Grand Tour. English people go in the 18th century and travel through Europe and then go to Venice and Florence and Rome and learn all about the classical tradition of art. And then you would come back and maybe you buy one of the paintings, you put it on the wall, and all of a sudden you acquire social prestige, right? You acquire social capital because you know this art. And then there's a few of your friends that also have had the same experience, that have the same access to the codes, that you can have this little private, select, very privileged discussion about art, and thereby you keep raising the level of your social status, cultural status. You acquire cultural capital. There's a problem. It's okay when it's like this, right? You can sit here, you can contemplate these paintings. I'll show a couple of just quick examples. But what about modern, more contemporary art, even at the end of the 19th century? If you don't have access to that discourse, that discussion about contemporary art and its ideas, one of the last things it's about is beauty. But this always used to be about beauty and contemplation and pleasure and reflection. If you don't have that code, understand the code to access the works, you end up frustrated, you end up lost. You go, what is this terrible art? This is just a bunch of scribbles on the wall, or that's really ugly, or whatever. So a beholder who lacks the specific code, this Bourdieu again, feels lost in the chaos of sounds and rhythms, also contemporary music, contemporary opera. How many have gone to a contemporary opera? Taisto Mäkelä or somebody? Nobody? There's a reason for that. It's not something you find terribly pleasant or enjoyable. It's not like Mozart or Don Giovanni. So this chaos of sounds and rhythms, colors and lines, without rhyme or reason, you don't understand what is going on. And so then you have to work again to acquire those codes so that you have insights into what's going on. This just happened to me, a similar experience, and I never did it before. I was at the Prado, and when you walk in, there are these guides that offer to show you around the museum. Never done it before. I studied art history too as an undergraduate, so I've been involved in this for a long time. So I thought, well, I wonder what she's going to say. She's a very experienced lady. And so she took me around and gave me some of the code, like 6 paintings. And it was very interesting. I ended up looking at those paintings differently, even though I knew the paintings. I looked at them differently because of what she told me about these codes, this information that I was then able to access the substance of the painting, whether it was technical, whether it was color, whether it was perspective, or what the story was that was being presented in the painting, the didactic painting. So it was worth it. I don't know if I'd do it again though. It's quite expensive, but I got these 2 American people to share it with me. So this is quite radical, this Bellatrix yellow. But the very first one that was intentionally designed to be a public museum was Schinkel's Altes Museum. It used to be in Ost Berlin for a long time, and now you can just, there's no checkpoint Charlie or Berlin Wall, you can just go see it. How many have been to this? It's just in Berlin. So it's a state-sponsored. Many of the museums now are sponsored by the city or state, but this was the very first one. And the plan, this is not a very good plan, but it's very symmetrical. But what are the kinds of paintings you would find in there? Just like, you find this disturbing or shocking or challenging? It's very pleasant, right? There's a Monet. So the idea with the collapse of the power structures of royalty, etc., was that entry into the codes, the introductions into the codes of art, were to be made accessible to the general public, not just very privileged people. So the idea was to educate the masses, the population in general, and especially when they start voting and the middle class rises, they have money, and all of a sudden the paintings are no longer just about kings and queens, but they're actually about these very wealthy people who have risen in power in the social structure, and this happened very much in the United States. This is, for example, the Frick collection in New York. Anybody been in the Frick collection? Okay, good. It's really a lovely kind of space, and it was open to the public. The owner died, and it was converted into this museum now with a nice collection. This was covered over. It was an indoor courtyard, and now it's covered. They have concerts there. But this is what it looks like inside. So this is 1935. So what's the real difference between this and Dulwich Art Gallery by Sohn? It's still the same sort of presentation of the works of art. The assumption is that you will have the same sort of experience with the work of art as from the very earliest typologies which organize the relationship between the viewer and the work of art. Right? Still the same. And there's a lot of philosophy written about aesthetics in the 18th century, including Kant, Immanuel Kant, and various other philosophers, even in England and Scotland, about what is aesthetic experience? What is this relationship that you do have with these works of art? What should the experience be? What is your expectations of what that relationship is? And usually, for Kant, he uses this term, purposive without purpose. That is, that the work of art is something which you contemplate, you reflect on, it gives you pleasure. Right? It's not something that jars you or irritates you or gives you a monkey mind, sort of calms you down. And that you experience this other world simply by sort of communing with that work of art. And then in the end of the 19th century, it's turned into this idea of empathy by some people in Austria and Vienna, about that you have an emotional, psychological attachment to the work of art. I'm feeling that you have empathy. So this emotion that you have, it's an emotion that thinks, and thinking that's emotional. So you have this circle, this relationship with the work of art that makes you just have a very pleasant experience. So here are the 4 art museums. So that's the history, very short, roughly talking about the aesthetic theory and what the relationship to the art work should be. You know, when I first went to Denver, I was recruited to teach there, and they have very good ski mountains, so I thought that's a good place to go. And the city has improved a lot since then, but it's a very interesting, dynamic place right now where our students, we have students from all over the world and all the United States come. It's a little plug for UC Denver. And our problem is they won't leave the city. Once they're there, and it's become now, in the United States, the discussion is, it's very attractive to millennials, this younger generation. There's a couple of other cities in the United States, but Denver is one of them, where young people come to school, and then they don't want to leave because they really, really like it. So, first time I saw this building, I said, what is this thing? At first I thought, is this like a medieval fortress? What is this thing? And I didn't know that much about Ponti, really. But there's in the Colorado, Denver climate, it's called the Mile High City, which means it's at an elevation of about 1,600 meters. So the sun is very strong there. And normal ceramic tile, glazed ceramic tile, will not survive in that. They have some Carrara marble gravestones in cemeteries, and they're completely dissolved. They sort of melt in this harsh weather. So these are cast ceramic, but then they're actually all glass. And what Ponti does is he puts different surfaces, and I'll show you on this building. And in fact, there's no real facade. There he is. Never met him. I met 2 of his daughters. Mom, that's about it. And it's in the central public space that I showed you that map earlier. And you can see the Ponti's building here. This is an early shot from the top of the Capitol. So this is called the Civic Center. And here's the original location. This is the location. And here's the city and county building. Here's the state capitol. Here's Graves' library now. And over here became the Libeskind building, and then there was the Clifford Still Collection Museum that was built there. And the Museum of Contemporary Art by Adjaye is down that way, about a mile, only about a mile from that wall. It was a small site. It had to become vertical, so it had to have a number of stories. It's 7 stories. At this time in the 60s, they had these psychologists and others in social sciences. They were doing research on how long do you last in a museum before you start getting tired and bored, right? Your feet are getting tired, you don't want it. 2 hours? Wow. I think most people are less than 2 hours. They did studies where it was 45 minutes. And this was Carl Otto, who was the director of the museum in the 60s. He did this research too, and it was being done all through the United States. And they found it was 45 minutes, which means it was 10,000 square feet, or about 1,000 square meters. And that's about 45 minutes for the average museum goer before fatigue, viewer fatigue, museum fatigue set in. So there's 2 towers. There's one here and one here. This is the ground floor. And each one has 1,000 square meters, 45 minutes. So you can take the elevator to one collection, and it's all on, there, so you can just go and see what that collection is, go away, so you don't get tired, and then go another day to see what the rest of the collection is. And here's a typical sort of floor. Not all of it was done the way that Ponti wanted. He worked with local architects. They tried to recruit even, Le Corbusier was still alive. I.M. was working even then. And there's a letter, there's only a photocopy, not the original one. There's a response from Le Corbusier. And his response is in French and just says that he's too tired. What can I do? Thank you, but he's just too tired. So it would be interesting if we had a Le Corbusier museum. Anyway, Ponti's pretty good. It's just sort of slabs, but on the ground floor there's different scales. And Ponti, you know, was an Italian chauvinist. He believed he was in the tradition of Vitruvius and Palladio and Alberti, etc. And he came up here. You can see that he has a very clear proportional system that's used throughout the building. And he would send back these drawings to the local architects, explaining to them, simplify things, to reduce variables. And his English was not very good. He'd write these, there's all kinds of mistakes in it, but very charming, very charming. And Giorgio, he was a very charming guy in these drawings. And he designed the facade as one ribbon. He called it a ribbon facade. There's something like 17 or 18 planes. And so the idea was that these two towers were already decided, 7 floors each. So he designed a facade that you simply wrapped around it. And he always designed the facade as this ribbon. It wasn't that you looked on, okay, here's the north facade, the east facade, etc. No, it's like this one continuous ribbon facade that he puts in place. And when you walk around it, it changes in the light. It's gray glass. And the tiles were designed in a very special way. They were going to have a sort of members club at the top with tents, and it never really happened. It would have been a fantastic space. They still haven't utilized it. I think they're scared of people jumping off and things. That's the way it is in the United States. And if you look, I'll show you some other slides. It has planes. The idea was, again, because the lawyers are everywhere in the United States, the idea was to have sculptures on these platforms on the outside. And here's the main entrance. And this was going to be an auditorium. And he, in fact, wanted to have it all surrounded by water. So it would be like a medieval castle with a moat that you have to cross to get into the museum, because he felt the museum was something that protected art from all the contamination outside. So I found this photograph in Milan, and this was the idea of that entry here, and I'll show you a couple more details. Sort of spooky, but this is the shape of it, and that's the only geometry used. This geometry is only used for the entrance, because then it's different from everything else in the building. It's beautifully detailed, stainless steel, light underneath. But the idea also is that this is a skin. This facade is something that you can pull apart, that you can peel away, that it's just a skin. And so he makes a lot of effort to have, one plane go behind the other, and then they just redid all the lighting. So at night, this whole has lights in it, and the building, he talks about, he had this idea about architecture that it dissolves at night, becomes less material, especially being lit up. And he would talk about whole cities with all the tall buildings being lit up in such a way that they were sort of dematerialized, almost floating, lacking substance. And you walk around it, and every day, if it's raining, if it's snowing, if it's sunny, if it's early in the morning, it's late in the evening, if it's at night, it's always a different building. So over these years, I've come to really appreciate what was going on with this work. And again, you can see how things are just peeled back. Every facade is different. And this is a design for the tiles. And they reflect light in a certain way. They are not flat. So the idea is that the building really is alive in many ways. Yeah, there's a reason for this. Right? So this is it at night. It's not a really great photograph, but it gives you this idea. The way he designed it to be lit at night was to become sort of, what is behind it? Maybe it only is this thin wall with light behind it. So, but what are museums competing with today? You know Purple Barney? Kids show? Oh, well, okay. Well, you probably have something equivalent here, I'm sure. See, I just have my notes. I actually don't read them. So, Ponti on the inside, the way the art is presented is very similar to all of the ideas in the 18th century already, 19th century, however early it was. And there's a competition now with mass media, popular media, television, sports, all these things, video games, right? Game Boys, they used to have Game Boys, all these things. And so what is the role of the museum? And so you're competing for people all the time to come into your museum. So the idea is that the museum, as I was talking about it, used to be a place where you go in very seriously. You commune with the work of art. You sort of defer your aesthetic experience to this work of art. So it's a sort of profound experience, emotional, psychological experience with the work of art, and you develop your taste, you acquire cultural capital, etc. But now what's happened is that most museums are run by boards of directors who have serious connections to large corporations. So the art that is presented cannot threaten, challenge, except in sort of okay ways sometimes, this idea of the order of things. That you can't be, that what has to be in the museum has to sort of confirm, reinforce certain kinds of social values, economic values, political values. There's many cases of this, and there's many people who have been writing about this recently. And so, here's I haven't seen it yet, so I reserve final judgment always until I've actually been to a building, so I'm going to go to it tomorrow. And Gary, what happens is that it was a financially difficult time in Bilbao. Then all of a sudden now, it's one of the most popular tourist places in the world. It's completely changed the culture of Bilbao, its economic status, etc. And so I've referred to this as the Bilbao syndrome, where everybody's trying to keep up. Here's the model of Bilbao and this urban renewal that was created, urban revitalization that was created by this one building, Guggenheim Foundation in New York. And there's quite a bit of, the English word, brouhaha. It's a lot of criticism right now because, and I'll show it in a while, they're trying right now, the Guggenheim Foundation, to establish a Guggenheim Museum in Helsinki. I'm sorry, Helsinki is not Bilbao. Here it is. I just got this off the web a little while ago. So you have lots of attention here, right? This is very important. And then you have this big one being built in Abu Dhabi. It's going to be one of the largest museums art museums ever. Maybe the biggest art museum, maybe not as big as the Louvre or something, but it's going to be really, really big. So there's tons of money there. And there's a collection in Venice. And then you can click on and UBS map global art initiatives, South and Southeast Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and North Africa. What's this about? So the art museum becomes an instrument of cultural colonization. Right. This is the Guggenheim Foundation based in New York City. And just like corporations, as in Madrid, Starbucks, Burger King, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, TGI Fridays, I could go on and on, right? So that's the corporate model of expansion for the Guggenheim, because they are a corporate entity. It's about expansion. Because the people running these organizations now are managers, corporate managers. That's where their backgrounds are. This is also happening in universities, by the way. So, why did they get... So it's just after 1. How much time do I have? 2? Okay, I can calm down. Let's slow down a bit. So there's a Libeskind building. There's a competition. There's a movie on it, if you want to see it. There's a 3-part movie that one of my former students was involved with. And Libeskind himself, when he was talking about this museum, referred to it as, instead of that serious, somber space for contemplation, that it's changing, it's moving to be a place for fun. He actually said that. It's a fun place. That's why Purple Barn. You get your kids to go, and your grandmother won't be upset. It opened in 2006. So, this term culture industry was coined by Horkheimer and Adorno in the 30s. They're part of the Frankfurt School. Adorno is someone I studied quite a bit. So the art museum today is part and parcel of the culture industry, whether you like it or not. That's what it is. Let's not be naive about what its goals are. So, new art museums are being built around the world at an unprecedented rate. How many new museums are there right now, art museums being built? They're all over the place. Why? What's going on? There's not that much good art to go around, is there? So what do they put into these buildings? How much does, a sort of cliche of modern art, Picasso or a Van Gogh painting, something like this big. How much does it go for? How much, if you go to auction, how much does it cost? Dollars or euros, whichever one you want. Anybody? In about 2005, if you went on the auction, same time that this building was built, it was about $100 to $110 million for either a Van Gogh or a Picasso. What was the price of this building? $110 million. So if you have a collection of art that is not very strong, there's no Guernica in Denver. There's no Mona Lisa in Denver. So if you're interested in promotion, if you're interested in getting attention for yourself, if you're interested in attracting tourists and visitors, for $110 million, you get this whole building that everybody writes about around the world. Who cares if you have a Picasso or a Van Gogh? They're all over the place. So it's particularly important for the expansion right now. Look very carefully at these museums. What is the single work, even one work of art that's worth going to? The Reina Sofia and the Prado, amazing stuff. It's an amazing collection you have in this country. It's stunning. And I hadn't seen it until just last week. It's stunning stuff. And but poor little Denver, it has a Monet, it has a something. But there's no work that you would say, oh, you have to go and see this. So for that same money, advertising, promotion, think of a corporate mentality. Advertising McDonald's, advertising, Starbucks, whatever. How do you get international attention for a city that is not yet a global city? It's not Paris or New York, which are the cultural capitals of, I'm sorry, that's true. This is the culture industries, the center of the culture industry. So what is Denver if it wants to compete? Oh, there's Bilbao. Let's do what they did in Bilbao. We'll get a lot of attention. We'll get lots of tourists to come. So here it is. Built, and here's the Graves Library, which is actually a good building. It's a good building. It works as a library very well. I want you to take note of, see these lines that look like, what do you think that is? Do you think it's structural? Would it be some sort of structural system? No? I thought so. I'm very naive. I thought, well, it must be structural. Probably beams. First thing I looked at. And then overhanging the street is this, and then it's just cut through. So, do you really feel comfortable driving under there? Is it glass holding that together? So this is what happened. Rain and snow started to leak. And I was there. I happened to be there on a day, because I'd go visit it. It took 2 years to repair it at a cost of another $10 million. They also had moisture problems in the wall and all these kinds of things. I've given this lecture, by the way, very critically in Denver, so people know what I think about this building. And so you had all this accumulation, all this leaking that happened, and there happened to be the structural engineer, the guy who was running the construction of this particular building, one of the main construction managers. And he's standing there. I said, were you working on this? He was sort of managing some of the fixing of this building. And I said, what were those things? I said, I thought they were beams or something. No. If you look at some of the drawings by Libeskind, he does this kind of thing. And so then you end up with him on a roof that causes all this problem. And it's very disturbing for me and disappointing for me that an architect would do something like that. Because I'm trained, my architectural training and my training as a carpenter, as a builder, is that things that the relationship between structure and material is a logical one. You don't fake things. This is like just decoration on here. It's like a cake and you put some decoration on it. There's no substance, there's no logic for why it was going on. This is how it was in the inside for a long time. Where do you hang the art? It also, I don't have to say anything to it. If you were going to design an art museum, would you go and talk to the people in the curators of the various collections to see what kind of space they need, right? What was their collection? How big are they? How big are the paintings, the sculptures, whatever the collection is? Don't you think that would be a sensible thing to do? Never happened. This whole collection had to be retrofitted into the spaces. They had to sell a whole bunch of the art because they couldn't find anywhere to put it. There's another term coined at the beginning of the century by Torsten Veblen, a Norwegian writer. Consumption as achievement. We know this one. So you buy stuff, and that how somehow is that you're achieving things, that you're some kind of progress in your life. And so what these corporate sponsors are doing now is building memorials to themselves. This edition by Libeskind is called the Hamilton Wing. And Hamilton was the board of the directors, and he happens to come from a very wealthy oil family. Actually, his wife had more money than him and married into this money. So he paid $10 million to have his name on the building. So it's called the Hamilton Wing now, the Hamilton building. $10 million if you want to put your name on a building. So, in many ways, think of it as corporate image laundering. You know about money laundering. Well, here are these people with this money who put their names on hospitals, on art museums, libraries, public institutions in a community to give themselves this image that they're good guys, that they actually care about. You know, it didn't matter how they got their money, how much sort of pollution they caused, how much land, how much disease, you know, all these kinds of things. But here it is that they're presented in a very sort of positive way. This is an international movement going on. So, what about the language that I don't like talking about this building actually. I'm trying to get through this and get something more interesting. So in all this sort of jargon that Libeskind was using when it was being designed and built, he referred to it as, I'm not kidding you, 2 lines going for a walk, a spatial dance, a nexus, vortex, or fulcrum of energy. It's gibberish, right? And he talked so fast that if you wrote down what he said, what is this nonsense? But the selection committee thought he was this genius, because he talked so fast. It's really the worst case of formalism. Formalism, why I mean that is that the form comes first. You can crumple a piece of paper and boom, that's your building. Then afterwards you figure out structural system, materials, functions, circulation, everything else. They're doing it. There are a few architects that operate this way. They spent $800,000, so about €500,000, advertising to try and announce the launch of this new building. You could buy some nice stuff for $800,000, €500,000, some art. The interior is like this white. Oh, no, that's a really good point. No, let's do this. So I noticed in the lobby of the building, on the other building, right? The stairs come down and they have put these planters, you know, planters, so you don't bash your head on the corner where the stairs come down. So in this case, this is a sharp edge that comes down because that's a structure. So they had to put these here so you couldn't walk against there. You couldn't go in there and bust your head open. Here's one of the exhibitions. This one floor actually works not too bad. So I was asking them, and they knew me. I said, how many square feet? Because I knew how much it cost, what the budget was, because it's public information. So I wanted to know how many square meters the building was, the square footage. They wouldn't tell me, they wouldn't tell me, they wouldn't tell me. And then finally, the public relations people contacted me, so I can't really trust these figures. I don't know if they're the real figures. But even if they're close, it's pretty sort of disturbing. Because this is the Libeskind building, and there's the, and they've named it now the North building. So they're going to try and sell the name. So you can make it the Johnson building, the Perez building, $10 million maybe. And they say the total gallery space, so it's only half as big. But when you really start looking at it, so it was $110 million, total of 146,000. So just think of this as, you can think of it in euros, and it's just less, you know. And I have square feet and not. So if it's 146,000 square feet, so it's 14,600 square meters roughly. Okay. So if the whole building you counted, it's like about $753 per square foot. There's a net square footage of exhibition space, so it's over $2,000 a square foot, or over $22,000 per square meter. And how much of the floor space can't you use? Subtract at least 10%. These bumpers, so let's just say 10%. So then it comes out to about almost $25,000 per square meter. Is that good use of public funds? Are you responsible to, is this being responsible to the public who voted to build this building? It belongs to the citizens of Denver. They voted for a bond issue to raise the money for it. So it was hijacked, it was taken away from the public, and then all the corporations and these wealthy people got in there. So the Ponti, I know it's not changing, but it's not for years, but 1971 it was $33 a square foot compared to $2,300 a square foot for the Libeskind. Here's a steel frame. We talked about, so I can be a little technical here. We talked about, you know, the logic of structure and material. This building, and again, because I visit it every now and then, during construction, etc., the head structural engineer was there. And they're assembling the steel frame. And I asked him, for the square footage you have, it looks as if this uses a lot more steel than a building of this much square footage, usually. I said, how much more steel than a standard detailed steel frame building? How much more steel? He sort of didn't want to tell me, sort of hemmed and hawed. Then he said, 6 times. 6 times. Is that being responsible with public funds? No wonder it starts to cost so much per square foot. All of the energy systems are absolutely cheap. It's we call it an energy hog. A public building should be something that should be leading the way in demonstrating energy efficiency, not this place. The structure is one that is in tension across the top. So you really have to load it up with all this steel. Okay, let's talk about something nice. I could go on and on with problems with that building. Right? No, I'm not kidding. I could talk for 2 hours about why it's a bad building. I'll end with a good thing about it, though. We have a new German, Christoph Heinrich is his name. He's a director, the new director of the museum. He's doing some very interesting things, adapting the building to his art. And he, in fact, commissions artworks to try and fit them into some of the spaces that are impossible. The other thing was I was on German TV, I was in Time magazine, I was in these newspapers because people were getting dizzy because it was like this. You know, people, if you're an athlete, you have very good inner ear balance. Most people, human beings are vertical, so you need your eyes to help you orient your balance, to keep your balance. Now the Gehry building, also the Disney concert hall in LA, I have to tell you this. So this elderly gentleman in LA said his wife, she stepped out for an intermission in the Disney music hall in LA, and she got all disoriented and just fell down and broke her hip. And because, you know, she's old and frail, her balance isn't very good anymore, and then the walls are white, which also then, where's the depth? And they're curved in you know, 2 dimensions curved, 3-dimensional curves, and this poor little lady came out and just couldn't understand where her balance was and fell down. So he was suing them for this and wanted me to be an expert witness and all this stuff. And I have friends, if you just go in the museum and say, I'm feeling sick, I don't know. And you can just sit there and listen to people saying this. And so I ended up defending Libeskind and Gehry, saying an architect doesn't intentionally create spaces and design things to make people feel uncomfortable or busy. It's just a consequence of this kind of geometry enabled by computer design. So just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. So next time if you're doing that, think about that poor little granny. You'll feel really bad if one of them falls down and breaks her hip. Don't do it. This is the Adjaye building. It has a revolving collection. It doesn't have a permanent collection. So it just has exhibitions. And my middle son was working there. He's in high school, but he works in this youth team called Failure Lab. And they do installations and projects and exhibitions there as part of this. It's a really interesting organization. It's a great urban intervention. It was a very difficult site. I think it's very, very successful. Here's some of the plans. I don't have a lot to talk about this, but it always, you know, there's this corner view that you always can get, so you always know where you are in the building. How many times do you get lost in an art museum? I get lost all the time. You look at the map all the time. You shouldn't have to look at a map to find your way in a building. Right? If you see signs everywhere, I think the building's failed. It received LEED Gold. You know LEED, the energy, in North America is LEED standard for energy efficiency, that received LEED Gold. For various technologies that it uses. The building beside here is also Corten steel, and it's the house of the young developer who gave the land for the Museum of Contemporary Art, so he then got David Adjaye to also design his house for him. So the house is right beside the museum, and it's this black Corten building. And I've been in it. It's actually dark inside, too. It's not very much fun. So the museum's much better than the house. But, and inside, this is the entry. It's sort of like a building without an entry. You go down the slot, and this door just automatically opens. They use this board with a space in it that lets light in at the same time. You can see here the main entry, and inside it goes up, the light falls down. These are really bright because there's lots of natural light. And one of the things that art museums are about, aren't they about natural lighting, about daylighting? You control it, but it comes in a very special way. The Libeskind building doesn't have any of that. And you can see how there's indirect lighting, just washes down the walls from up above. Very traditional ways of lighting interiors of museums. They have a library in there. The staircases of steel, it's very modest materials. Nothing is expensive in this building, but it really works well. There's the roof, there's a glass floor, so I can never wear a kilt if I go up. here's the corner on the top where you can always, if you go here, you can see up the street, up 15th Street. And it really does work well as a museum. There is one of these Clifford Still's paintings. Does anybody know which museum it is in Madrid? I saw it last week. I was surprised. It's Reina Sofia. And it's beside the, what's that guy? One of your colleagues did the dissertation on space. Rothko. It's right beside a Rothko, which is, and maybe appropriate, same sort of time. But here's the self-portrait by Clifford Still. This is one of his paintings. The idea, nobody knows about Clifford Still, but you will. He is the most important American artist in terms of the abstract expressionism. And nobody really knows about this. Why? Because he traveled around a lot. He was in New York City. He hated the culture, the sewer of galleries and dealers selling his paintings. He just left, and then the only way you could buy one of his paintings, he did stuff in the 40s before anybody else was doing it, and then all the abstract expressionists talk about this. But nobody knows about Clifford Still, because there's only a few paintings of his that are in the public that were sold. I think it's absolutely amazing. I'll talk about Still first. So, only 6% of his work he sold. This museum has 94% of his work. 94%. Most of which has never been seen by the public. It's all rolled up. So every month they unroll one of the 2,300 works of art. One of these paintings or drawings. And one of the things is, 820, there's 2,400 works, 825 paintings, and 1,575 works on paper, 3 sculptures, letters, notebooks, all these kinds of things. We had this great mayor who taught them. He never lived in Denver, but our mayor taught the daughters of Still to bring the collection and build a museum for you. The auction house, Christie's Auction House, you know about this? Christie's Auction House, they have auctions, they sell things, furniture, paintings, art, whatever. Very famous, one of the largest in the world. In 2005, you can look it up, a painting by Still of 1955 that he did, sold for $7.8 million, 5 million euros, right? In 2006, a 1947 painting of his sold for 17 million euros. And they can't sell, one of the agreements is they cannot sell a single painting, any work from this museum. It is a permanent collection. So if you do the math, how much is this collection worth? His widow, to give some additional money for the museum, sold 2 Clifford Still paintings, and they brought like $12 million. So they have 825 paintings and 1,600 other works. So this is why you should come to Denver. This is the only, I would argue it's one of the great single museums dedicated to a single artist. And it's a beautiful building, and it really works. The idea here is that the building isn't screaming, look at me, right? The building is about being quiet and serving the function, that is the art. The ego of the architect is just quieted down. Yeah, Rothko, sorry. Why can't architecture be quiet? Why does it always have to scream and yell? Isn't the best architecture silent? You're just very comfortable. It doesn't make you upset. Anyway, so I'm really proud that we have Ponti's only building in North America, and we have the Clifford Still Museum. And here's the site plan, here's this one. 9 square plant, by the way. I went to school, in fact, at University of Oregon, my undergraduate with Brad Cloepfil. Very interesting lighting, day lighting. It's a concrete screen. Works very well. And these are some of the very large paintings. But still, we have this sort of 18th century idea of communing with the work of art. So I have some images. They're not all very comforting. So if you're easily upset, I want to apologize beforehand. Frontal nudity. But there's some other stuff that's not. And I could play the video here, but this is Matthew Barney. He was married to Bjork. And so instead of Purple Barney, what art is really about today is more like Matthew Barney. This is from one of his movies. That's Barney on the right, and that's one of his models on the left. This is Cremaster 3. This is one of a series of films. They're very long. Oh, it's almost like Wagner or something in the kind of density of this. And this is the Actionists in Vienna. This was in the 50s. Schwarzkopfler, who he was not quite right. In one performance, he apparently castrated himself. And there were these images all the time of the most underlying things we're frightened of, or disturbed by. This is Chris Burden, 1973. He came and visited me. I was a young man, and I ended up spending a day with him because I worked with conceptual artists from the age of 15. Who were my first girlfriend's neighbors. Got introduced to them. So I followed a lot of this, and Burden came to town and lectured, and he just sort of hung out for the day. And what this is Doorway to Heaven. He took 2 electrical wires, live electrical wires, jabbed them into his chest, and then they exploded. He's also very famous for another gallery performance called Shoot. This is close. Shoot, where he's in a gallery, and he has his friend shoot him in the arm with a rifle. He has another one where he's sitting in a cage, and there's a rifle aimed at him, and anybody can come and pull the trigger at him. We have some disturbed faces already. This is the light stuff. I mean, the stuff that's going on now. Some of the stuff, I think, they're mentally ill people who use art as an excuse to do all these really unpleasant things to their own bodies. Really unpleasant, and it's not art. It goes too far, even for me. Here's one of my favorites. Bastian Otter, that was the video in the beginning. The man crying, I can't tell you. And he disappeared, but here he is. He's hanging onto a branch, That's a canal in Holland. He holds on there and holds on there and holds on there until he can't hold on anymore. You know how human beings are always fighting gravity? This is about gravity. It's about surrendering to gravity, allowing yourself to finally fall. There's another one where he rolls off of a roof. And he rides his bicycle into a canal. This is an Australian artist. You know Stellark? Anybody know Stellark? This is old stuff. I always wonder how he got himself, how is he standing up really? How did he get his body out there? And he's strung on meat hooks. Okay, I'll change it. So he's out there in the ocean, Japanese ocean. And how did he get his body with all, because it's very, you have to sterilize the meat hooks that go through your skin. How do you get your body out there onto that frame? I don't know. That's a dissertation. He also surgically implants certain kinds of things into his body. Some artists insert electrical devices into their cavity, their abdominal cavity. He hooked himself up to, well, here's one of my favorites. Okay, I'm not the Stella. She now basically is seen as a sellout. Brahmovich, she had a large retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And to enter it, she had naked people standing at the sides of the door. So you had to walk between them to go into the exhibition. So right away you're not going to be comfortable. But this is a film where, and I don't have time to show it, but it's about 13 minutes long. And it's called Art Must Be Beautiful, Artist Must Be Beautiful. She combs her hair, she's brushing her hair like this. Art must be beautiful, artist must be beautiful, and she gets more and more violent as she goes, where she's like getting angry and doing all this stuff. It goes on for 13 minutes. It's not very funny. This is Human Blood by Saran. I'm showing you the mild stuff. You don't know anything about this? Well, good. Then you can start thinking about what an art museum is. Because this is art museum. And he got into a lot of trouble because he did a work called, excuse my French, Piss Christ, where he put a cross upside down into a container of his urine. And so the politicians in Washington got all upset about it, because he was using government money to do it. So, this is Orlan. This is a commitment to art. Let me see if there's a mild one. Okay, that's less disturbing. So Orlan, French artist, little video on her, you can look her up. She has a series of plastic surgeries done. I have 20 minutes, I can just calm down and try to rush through. It's really questioning beauty. Remember the thing that was the guiding principle of art for centuries? The pleasant that you could associate with. But here's an artist's commitment. She has 7 plastic surgeries. And each one has to do with a cliche of female beauty in a painting through history. She even does the Mona Lisa and has this plastic surgery done. And then you could buy, and then they remove things and add things. And she would sell the vials of her fluids from her body. You could buy them and put them in your collection. This is mild stuff. Why are you all freaked out? This isn't mild stuff. You see the stuff that's going on. And so she's always taking on ideas about female identity, challenging those cliches, it's sort of, she's French, so it probably has something to do with the French feminism at the time. And here she is with, well, everybody knows this work, right? She loves this picture because it's about ecstasy, but it's also, she says, and many other critics write about it, as very sexual. The sort of ecstasy is also not just spiritual, but also physical, sexual ecstasy. This is Damien Hirst. You know Damien Hirst? British artist. This was one of his works in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver. And we all know this painting. That's his version of it. This is his work. I'll tell you about this one. This is called Corporate World. So let me just quote a little bit before I go on with these images. Theodor Adorno, writing in the 30s, 40s, 50s, claims that the responsibility of art is to confront society with its disturbing aspects. It's about disturbing you, making you wince and go, "Whoa," making you uncomfortable. The task of art is not to present or provide answers, but rather that you have to start questioning yourself what the practice of art is, or what it can do for society. What does it contribute to society? And it's certainly not about delusions and making you feel that everything's okay and your life's nice and everything's nice in the world. Schopenhauer, here's a quote from Schopenhauer about life. Life is a missliche Sache, a disagreeable thing. I have determined to spend mine reflecting on it. So Schopenhauer's going to spend his whole career reflecting on life as this miserable thing. So this one is, so this is based on this image. This is a real skull from Mexico. It's a human skull, it has real teeth in it, has a hinging jaw. And so for the Love of God is first work of 2007. But here's some very specific things about it. You might be interested. It's a platinum. It's solid platinum. It's a platinum cast of an 18th century European male skull. It's made with 8,601 diamonds. Anybody know about diamonds? You know what a carat is? You know how big your diamond is? It's a total of 1,106.18 carats. In the middle of the forehead is a large, flawless, pear-shaped pink diamond that's worth $8 million, 5-6 million euros. There's 14 flawless white pear-shaped diamonds. There are real human teeth set into the platinum skull. And the jaw hinges like the Aztec skull. So it was, how do you get $100 million just in materials? Poor artist, starting artist. How many artists do you know that can come up with $100 million to do this? It was a corporate investment strategy. And Damien Hirst himself was part of the organization. He was part of the corporate investment group that came up with the money to do this. $100 million. So art art museums promote a relationship with art, a relationship to art, about 150 years ago. The art museum is not an old cultural organization, an old cultural institution. It's not that old. We think we've always had it. We haven't. And in some cases, the relationship, how it's designed, is still appropriate, like the Clyfford Still Museum. Right? So with Hearst, though, you have so much art, though, that operates outside the walls of the museum. They're not interested in that 18th century model of aesthetics and Kant and etc. It's not what art today is about. Some of it can be, but in generally, the work of substance is not. So with Hearst, you know, this kind of, there's a certain resolution here, answer. So for the love of God, this work reconciles the agendas of art, artists, administrators, and investors, corporate management models, etc. He's absolutely part now of that model. The marketplace is the auction house, right? The art gallery. And now the museum, as well as Damien Hirst, as one of the corporate masters of ceremony. Corporate master of ceremony. Artist as a corporate master of ceremony. I'm going to put this on. Do you want to watch something for 4 minutes? Then we're done?
So who decides what is art? Is it enough, like Mansoni to Kadafar, to common people it can be hard to understand that making art can be to crap in a can, or Felix elephant done on canvas, because he's famous, he can even sell on Kansas. Rick comes to tie and make people happy, and John Box styles to make it look crappy. Art is great, it has no limitations. You can get by doing recitations, masturbating at an art exhibition. Many did so in a progression. I surely wouldn't go as far as this. Elga Christopher drinking her piss. Bourbon shots rise in the armpit. Operations like all lands start all worth it. So many artists in this wide world, and many of us just won't get heard. Better to learn to deal with rejection. Critics and curators have made their selection. So many artists in this wide world, and many of us just won't get heard. I want to take part in art history too, but you can only do what feels right with you. Fraser shows how the art world is small by fucking a collector and showing it to us all. Art is not a secret, it's like any other system. It's all about finding your own rhythm. Political art with all too much text. It's time consuming and often far too complex. Going to the edge embodies more of a risk. When Catalan crucifies his gallerist. Fitting in and pleasing is like design. Art should do the opposite and move people's minds. Selling yourself with a good joke and a smile, while handing out a catalog with panic and with style. Selling paintings is a piece of cake. If you wanna make money, that's what it takes. Collectors and galleries want objects and goods, and art is a human too. We all need food. Food is important, depends on TV, or whether or not you hit on TV. Bitterness, bitchiness, and jealousy. Is he or she a better artist than me? So many artists in this wide world, and many of us just won't get hurt. Better to learn how to deal with rejection, and critics and curators have made their selection.